Today in the show, we're talking about the non-Disney music of Main Street USA. Now, I'm sure it comes as no surprise to you to hear how important music is to setting the mood of Main Street USA, but have you ever really stopped to think about just how much music there is? Sure, there's the Main Street music loop playing through the speakers, and there are the Dapper Dans serenading the folks passing by. But there really is a ton of music and musical groups performing throughout the day. Probably more than you even realize. And so much of it isn't even Disney specific. Joining me to discuss the plethora of musical options and some of the music's origins and history is the creator of the album and live shows Swingin with the Mouse, Pablo Rossil. Pablo has taken his love of music and Disney and turned it into a unique musical experience for all to enjoy. Join us as we walk right down the middle of Main Street, USA.
It's time to dive into today's Disney dialogue.
Welcome back to the show, Pablo. It's been a while.
It has. Thanks, Jeff. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well, and if you're here, you know what that means. We're talking about music, aren't we?
That's right, baby.
Yeah, and today we're focusing on Main Street USA and Disneyland. And listen, it's no secret. Everybody knows that there's music on Main Street, but I think most people would be surprised if they took the time to count the amount of music, not only like the selection of songs, but also the amount of ways that we get music on Main Street USA. It's kind of remarkable. And even I, as we were sitting down to prepare for this, I was kind of like in the back of my head, I know this is all there, but when you actually list it out, you're like, holy crap, this is a ton.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you expect music to come out of the attractions, right, of each land. And when you think of Main Street, which is not a land, what would you call Main Street?
It is a land, actually. Technically, it is a land, yeah.
I was just testing you. Main Street, has one attraction, one like legit attraction, which is Lincoln, right? Or is that
I mean, they do consider all of the vehicles on Main Street to be attractions. They were ticketed attractions back when the ticket books existed. But yes, I know what you're saying. The
music comes out of the attractions usually. Like that's what you think. Oh, I remember Yo-Ho, A Pirate's Life for Me, or I remember, Grim Grinning Ghosts from these rides, not from a street.
Yeah.
And I think jumping into the research for this, or looking into these options, musical options that are out there at Main Street, it's very impressive to see how much is packed into that little piece of land.
Yeah, and because of that, there's no way we could talk about it all today. So we're actually going at it from a very kind of interesting angle, which is the non-Disney music that we hear on Main Street USA. And, here's the thing. A lot of us Disney fans, including myself, often poke fun at or are critical of Disney for making everything so IP heavy and there's always a franchise related. But when you think about music on Main Street USA, there's actually quite a bit of it that is not original to Disneyland, even though some folks might think it is, considering it might be the only place they've ever heard it. So we're looking at it that way today. We're looking at the different groups. We're looking at the non-Disney music that is heavily a part of Main Street USA. And let's before we jump into the music, though, let's talk about Main Street USA itself. Of course, most people listening probably know, but just in case they don't, it is a turn-of-the-century town around the year 1910. There really is no specific year mentioned, but a lot of people say 1910. I'll even go up to 1920 sometimes. There's the vehicles are on the street, and we've still got gas lamps, but we've also got electric lights. So it's kind of a mix of things, and it's not like super, super strict, but early 20th century. And of course, it's based on Walt's boyhood Main Street of Marceline, Missouri, but it was also influenced by Harper Goff's Main Street USA in Fort Collins, Colorado. And although, the music loop is very, very famous on Main Street USA, that wasn't really always there. There's always been music as part of it, but like the loop as we kind of know it today, and of course it's changed through the years, that didn't really come in until the early 1970s. So that's past Walt's time in the park. And like I said, there was always
Wow.
some sort of music, but it wasn't as, prominent as it is these days. So it's kind of fun. And let's just start with that Main Street loop music. And one of the things I love about this, and we're not going to get through all the songs, because once again, as I was doing research, I was like, holy crap, there's even more songs than I realized here. But I want to focus on the musical theater because you and I are two huge fans of musical theater. And the musical theater representation in the Main Street music loop is really awesome. I want to start with the Wells Fargo wagon. That's the one that people hear da 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 da.
That's right.
Yeah. And the funny thing is, of course, we know the lyrics in our heads when we hear it, but like most people probably don't know the lyrics at all. They just think of it as a melody. But that song, Wells Fargo Wagon, is from The Music Man, which opened on Broadway in 1957, which is a personal favorite of mine. I love The Music Man. I think it's one of the first musicals I ever remember seeing on stage. It was a community theater production, but made a huge influence on me to the point that I actually flew to New York last year to see Hugh Jackman in the leading role of that show. And it's just a great musical with great music. So 1957, it was on Broadway, but of course, we're talking early 20th century here, so that doesn't make sense. But that's because The Music Man takes place in 1912 in River City, Iowa, a very small town, just like Main Street, USA. So it's super fitting.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's it's I was just thinking as you were saying 1950, what is it?
1957.
7.
So yeah, it came out, The Music Man came out 2 years after Disneyland. Isn't that wild?
That's crazy. And only what, 13, 14 years before they put it on the street. So it was fresh music, sort of like fresh American music at the time. But still, it lent to the vibe of, 1910, 1900 America, which is awesome.
Yeah, and Meredith Willson is the composer of The Music Man, and Walt and Meredith Willson were friends. And so when they did like a big celebration in 1959 when they opened the Matterhorn and the submarines and the monorail and such, and I think it was a surprise for Meredith Willson. If I'm remembering this correctly, there's video of this. Walt or somebody gave a baton to Meredith Willson and just had him stand like in Town Square and said, just start conducting the band as they come down the street. And like to his surprise, out came a massive band of 76 trombones playing the song 76 Trombones from The Music Man.
I just got chills.
Yeah, even before the history of, The Music Man being played every day on Main Street, USA, there was some history of this musical in the theme park. And it's kind of cool to know that like him and Walt knew each other. And I love that musical so much. And yeah,
that really enriches. Anytime I hear that on Main Street now, I'm going to think of that. And I think that's awesome. That's so cool. I had no clue.
You're learning stuff here on Disney Coast to Coast. Hopefully somebody listening learned a little something as well. But yeah, I absolutely love that song and that musical. Anything you want to add to that before I move on to the next one?
No, I mean, I think you covered it. It's probably one of the ones that embodies the feeling of Main Street the most, at least for me.
Yeah, it is. It's so interesting. Like even knowing these songs from other platforms, which I'm sure a lot of people don't even know them from anything else. They just know them as Main Street. But like, even if you do know them, it still embodies Disneyland and Main Street USA. And I love that about it. And listen, The Music Man got one song represented on Main Street, but Hello, Dolly, a song that, or a show rather, that opened on Broadway in 1964. It takes place in the 1890s. So also very fitting for the timeline of Main Street USA. Which I love, like some thought went into this. And I would say even today when there are updates to it, I'd say they're pretty clever. I know that there have been a lot of like more modern things added, and maybe not date wise, it may not fit, but like I do feel like they always get the right feel to it. And I'm not going to lie, this might be a little blasphemous to say. When it's Christmas time and we don't have the normal music loop, it's Christmas music, I kind of miss the normal music loop.
Yeah, it feels like you're in a different park when you don't have that music playing.
I want to hear Wells Fargo Wagon played with like Christmas bells or something. We should just have the same songs played in
The Wells Fargo sleigh ride.
Yeah. There we go. I am all for that.
I'm on it, Jeff.
I want it in your next show. Fantastic. So Hello Dolly, we get the musical, or the song rather, Before the Parade Passes By, which is da 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 da, which I think is so perfect because, I mean, how many parades have passed by Main Street USA through the years? Like quite a few.
Yeah.
So it's very fitting. Before the parade passes by, there's this song Elegance. Dun dun da dun 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 da dun 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 dun. And then one of my absolute favorites, Put on Your Sunday Clothes. Dun 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 dun. And for me, this was one that really stuck with me because I remember seeing Hello Dolly for the first time, community theater. I think it was the same community theater where I saw The Music Man. This was the Colonial Chorus Players in Reading, Massachusetts. If anybody in Massachusetts is listening and knows the Colonial Chorus Players, there you go. You get a shout out. But I remember seeing Hello Dolly, and really, it was a new show to me. I didn't know it at the time. I was a kid. But I do remember Put on Your Sunday Clothes being performed in that show, and me being like, oh, it's the Walt Disney World Happy Easter Parade. Because not only is it played on Main Street, but in the, I've done episodes all about the Walt Disney World Happy Easter Parade, and most of the years, if not all, they always had a section of, women dressed in their, women and men dressed in their Sunday best, and they would sing Put on Your Sunday Clothes. And like, for me, this was truly a Disney song. And when I found out it was like in a musical, I was like, holy crap, my worlds were colliding, and like little Jeff's mind was being blown.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I was exposed to it at Disney first, being, I think us SoCal people that go to Disney as kids, I didn't have musical theater until I was probably in high school or a little after high school. So, I was pretty culture shocked too when I saw Hello Dolly the first time.
And then another musical represented on Main Street is Oklahoma, but not that song. Oklahoma opened on Broadway in 1943. It takes place in 1906. So there's a theme here, folks. And Sorry with the Fringe on Top, bum 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 ba da da dun dun dun, that one, and Kansas City, da 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 da, both heard on Main Street USA, both from the musical Oklahoma. And it's full of musical theater. So I'll tell you what, folks, I know there are a lot of people out there who don't necessarily love musical theater, or they say they don't love musical theater, but I will tell you this. If you are one of those folks, although let's face it, if you're listening to this show, there's a pretty good chance you love musical theater. But if you say you don't and you love the music of Main Street USA, I'd have to fight you on that point. I think you might like musicals more than you think. So, or at least the music in musicals. And Main Street USA represents it well. And one of the things to touch upon is, listen, we just named 3 different musicals. There's a bunch more music. There's a lot of standards. There's some Disney music. But all recorded in a very kind of similar style.
Yeah, which I find interesting because you say that it started in the 70s. I wasn't around in the 70s, but from the late 90s, like when my memories really started picking up from Disney, into today, I haven't really noticed a difference in the recordings. So like they have really good recordings of some stuff, and then the new stuff they pump in there matches, it's a really good engineer, but they sort of don't feel like they don't belong together.
Yeah, they definitely don't feel like they were recorded at different times. I have no idea if any of them were re-recorded or not. That would be interesting to look into. My guess is that they have like cleaned some of the older recordings. We don't hear like record scratches or anything. They're very, very clean, but they do. I've never noticed a difference in audio quality through the years. And you're right. That's kind of a fascinating point. And like you said, when they do add anything new, it matches really, really beautifully. And yeah, I'd love to sit in on that recording session. That would be like just epic. Hey, we're going to record the music for Main Street. All right, here's history being made. Like, kind of remarkable.
I do have to interject with a thought. All of these songs are travel songs or get ready for this journey songs. And I think that is really something that they must have put that into that, put on your Sunday clothes, get ready for this, you guys, you're going to have fun. Wells Fargo Wagon is a traveling song, like riding down Main Street. I mean, it's one of those songs that like they do such a good job with the set list that you could imagine thousands of songs being played, and you've heard the same songs over and over the years, but it feels fresh every time,
Yeah. A ton of thought was put into this, clearly, way more than any of us ever think about, unless you're going to sit down and record a podcast about it. And that's what I kind of love about deep diving into this nerdy old stuff, quote unquote, that like you just look at it completely differently after. I really hope anybody listening to this walking down Main Street the next time they do it, like has a moment of just thought about, gosh, a lot of thought went into this. And we all know this, right, about Disney. This is not like new news. Oh my God, a lot of thought and talent was put into this, but like, I don't know, when you actually sit and think about it, it's kind of remarkable. But in any case, that's the music loop. That's the pre-recorded stuff that we get on Main Street USA. So let's move on to some of the live music, of which there is aplenty available on Main Street USA. Let's talk about the Dapper Dans, of which I've done a whole episode about. I spoke with the Dapper Dan, so if you're a Dapper Dan fan, I highly suggest you check that out. Of course, I'll have it in the show notes. But this is an a cappella musical group for the most part. Sometimes they'll add little instruments in. So the Dapper Dans obviously have a huge list of songs that they'll perform. Some of them Disney, some of them not. There's a song called I'm Forever Blowing Bubbles, which was written in 1918.
I'm forever blowing bubbles, pretty bubbles in the air. I guess the thing to say about the Dapper Dans is that they are from an era similar to that of the musicals we had talked about, the late 1800s, early 1900s. People would get together at barbershops and sing 4-part harmonies. It's very tight. Disney fans might know the Grim Grinning Ghosts as a barbershop quartet or quintet, I guess. It's a 5-piece. But the thing that links Dapper Dans to the rest of the music in the area is the Americana feel of that turn of the century.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the Dapper Dans are like kind of what keep barbershop quartets alive right now in the 21st century. I'm not going to say they're the only ones. They're certainly not. But as far as I'm pretty sure, like Disney has some sort of record as far as like the longest employed barbershop quartet. And maybe the pandemic kind of screwed that up a little bit as far as, their record run. But yeah, I mean, I'd be surprised if like I went up to 80% of the people on the street and asked, hey, barbershop quartet, what's the first thing you think of? And it's not Disney parks. And you know what? If it's not Disney parks, there's a pretty darn good chance. You know what it is, Pablo?
Wow.
The Music Man.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Yeah.
Ida Rose. What's the song?
Light a Rose.
Yeah, Light a Rose.
Which I think the Dapper Dans sometimes perform as well. Light a Rose. They also sing songs like Mr. Sandman, which was published in 1954. And
yeah, so that's one that was it was a tune in the 50s, but the sound is so reminiscent of that linking moment between the turn of the century and the 50s that it just fits right into the rest of the sets. For that one, the Dapper Dans use these little wooden mallet xylophone things called Deegan organ chimes. And those are not really used anywhere anymore, but they're fixed tuned instruments that give the Dapper Dans, an additional sound other than just the vocals, the vocal harmonies.
I always find it interesting when you said those aren't used anymore, like those aren't created anymore, those instruments.
No, I mean, along with something that we'll touch base on later, I guess, but
Yeah.
it's it's an instrument of the past. It's the issue is that they're fixed pitches, so they could only use them for certain keys, certain songs.
But what's so fascinating about the fact that they're not really produced anymore is when something happens to them, somebody who knows what they're doing needs to fix them, right? So it's like they're really the same way that they're kind of keeping barbershop quartets alive. They're also kind of keeping these instruments alive, which is pretty fascinating.
Right.
And another tune from the Dapper Dans, Goodbye, My Coney Island Baby, composed in 1924. So for me, that's still kind of lies in that turn of the century. I don't know when the turn of the century is officially over. Probably 1910 is the end of the turn of the century. But basically, for me, it's up to 1929 in my mind.
Yeah,
anyway.
exactly. Yeah, when everybody got really sad, I think it sort of shifted to a new era. The Great Depression.
Yeah. What year was that? I'm not a history guy.
1929.
Oh, that's the year of the Great Depression?
Yeah,
All
October of 1929.
I say I'm not a history guy. I'm not a real life history guy. I'm just a Disney. I'm just a Disney history guy. So basically the unimportant stuff, I know a lot about. The stuff that shaped this country, not so much. But, can't know everything, right? Anything else you want to add about the Dapper Dans before we move on? Because there is so much to get to.
Yeah, I just think they're great. I think that they're them using tap as part of their show is also really cool, which is something that's a little different to other barbershop quartets.
And have they also not used handbells, I think, at Christmas time? They've worked kind of instruments into it. And even they use the not that this is a musical instrument, but the pitch pipe is something I don't know if people necessarily see what that is, but a lot of times but what's interesting to me is they'll use it for some tunes and not others. So do you have any insight into why? Actually, let me explain what the pitch pipe is before we jump into that. Anybody listening, if you have ever seen the Dapper Dans, one of them will take this little circular instrument, for lack of a better term, out of their pocket and blow on a note before they start a tune. And that note kind of make sure everybody is in sync. And Pablo can explain it better as to why they might use it sometimes and not others.
Right. So in music, that's called being in the right key. And if you're off a little bit, that's when somebody's out of tune. So the reason they use it at the top of songs is to let them know this is the key that the song's in. It could be one of 12 keys, and this is what you're going to sing in. At the end of the song, they're singing at the same key, right? Unless there was a change, but they're singing in a key that they all understand. And if there's no patter after that song, they can use that pitch, that musical sort of place, high or low, whatever it is, to tell them what the next key is. And they know, in our set list, this song is in F and that song is in G. So we just have to move up a step. Or, that's for the musical people out there, I guess.
Yeah, and for the non-musical people, let me just say that is an incredibly difficult thing to just know innately or even be trained to do. It is not easy. Even hearing that pitch at the beginning, because the note that's being blown, it's not like every singer or all four of them start singing on that same note. So it's not this is the pitch.
They usually don't.
Yeah. It's not like this is the song, the note we're starting on. So it's a skill. It's a serious skill to have no musical accompaniment in the background. And there are many great singers out there who could not do what the Dapper Dans do. And I'm talking about some of your favorite singers in the world that could not do what the Dapper Dans do every single day. It's quite impressive.
Yeah.
It's kind of it reminds me of, the chorus or a swing in a Broadway musical. The swings especially are these performers who learn not every track, but a lot of different roles in the show, so that if there's an accident or somebody calls out sick, they can basically fit into a lot of different roles. And holy crap, talk about the unsung heroes of theater. It's quite remarkable. And there's this saying, leading men don't dance, and that chorus is dancing their butts off, and there's so many people working so hard who get so much less recognition. And I kind of put the Dapper Dans there. But luckily they have, a nice audience daily in the Disney parks.
They're a unit. They have to be a unit or else they wouldn't be what they are.
Yeah. And frankly, like, let's just, Main Street USA this is becoming a Dapper Dans episode again, but like, it wouldn't be what it is without the Dapper Dans. And I know that there was that fear, right? Like during the pandemic, it was questionable what entertainment would return. And I don't think the Dapper Dans were necessarily 100% safe. I don't think anything was 100% safe. So the fact that like they're still there and it was recognized that they are that important, I think is, smart on Disney's part. I think there would be an uproar if the Dapper Dans ever went away.
Absolutely.
Let's move on from there to one of my favorite folks, the Disneyland Band, which of course is a marching band and a lot of brass instruments and woodwinds here, and of course the percussion section. And yeah, they do play a ton of Disney music, whether it's, attraction songs or songs from media. They play a lot of that, but they're also pretty integral, as you were saying, on building the Americana of Disneyland, especially during the flag retreat. That's a moment that happens every day in Town Square. And here we hear the band play a salute to the armed forces. This is a medley of the armed force themes. And it's hard to find an exact year that these were written, but like 100% they just fit into the Americana of Main Street USA.
So all of the branches of the armed forces have different themes, different songs that go with the unit. Usually at baseball events or at 4th of July events, the band plays sort of a medley of these tunes to honor each branch. As an example, the Marine Hymn was written by Jacques Offenbach in 1867. So it predates a lot of the music that we are talking about today, but it does fit into a very important time in our country's life, the Civil War era, as it spans in either direction, back and forth. There is a connection to the Americanness outside of just, the armed forces themselves. The song itself connects us to that feeling of America.
For sure. And, the Disneyland Band, I feel like covers... I do feel like it's probably less and less through the years. It does. Now that is a section that I will say is becoming very IP and franchise heavy when it wasn't always. Yeah. But there's still moments of it, especially during the flag retreat ceremony. So there's that.
Yeah, it was something that changed in, I think, 2014, 2015. They changed from the Disneyland marching band to what we know today. I don't know if you noticed the shift in the costumes and the music, as you said, but they actually kicked out a lot of older cast members at that time.
Well, I remember this was a huge controversy. Now, so I was livid because it happened right around the 60th anniversary. So it was 2015. I think it was the day of the 60th anniversary kickoff celebration, or the official day, one of those. They were like, we're getting rid of the Disneyland band. We're bringing in the Disneyland band.
Right.
And I loved the Disneyland band and I loved the old one. So I was very upset to hear that was happening. But I gotta say, the new Disneyland band, which is much more drum corps than just marching band. And what I mean by that is there's tons of choreography. It's not just marching down the street playing an instrument, which is what it primarily was prior to that change. Since then, the choreography that's involved, it's awesome. It's a blast to watch. But as you said, with that change, kind of that change of some of the song selections, and they certainly always played some Disney music, but it's become heavier in that realm, I would say.
It was, every day culminated with a concert in the park, they would call it, where the Disneyland band would be set up in the circle where the flag is. They'd put up umbrellas, they'd put up 30 chairs, and they'd do a concert like a symphonic band. I think the tuba player would move to bass for some songs. Like, it was a really different time in the music of Disneyland, much like swing time at Carnation Plaza. But that's where they would do, date night at Disneyland, and all those swing bands would play there. It was just a different element to the musical makeup of Main Street, that symphonic concert. And that all went away when they replaced the old band with the current band that's more akin to the Disney College Band, the All American College Band.
Yes, which is another thing we'll touch upon in a moment. But another song that they play is the Washington Post March, which is a John Philip Sousa song from 1889. So that's the one that you know is da 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 da. Great little marching band tune. Gonna be honest, I think the first time I heard that song was at a McDonald's. I vividly remember back when McDonald's was cool in the 80s. God, it was so wild in the 80s. But I remember like my local McDonald's had like a 3-person carousel in it. And I remember the button was way up high on the wall, so only the adults could hit it and make it spin. But it played like, public domain music. And I'm pretty sure this song was one of them. So I always think of McDonald's when I hear this song, which is so weird.
And it was commissioned by the Washington Post for John Philip Sousa to write, right? So for it to go from like one of the largest media outlets in the world to a McDonald's, is sort of funny.
The world is cruel sometimes, that's just how it works out. But yes, the Disneyland Band, of course, is part of the sound of Main Street USA. And I will say this is one of maybe the only sound of Main Street USA that goes beyond that land. Because, of course, the Disneyland Band you'll find in Fantasyland and Tomorrowland and Frontierland, and they move throughout the day. So they are an integral part of the sound of Main Street USA, but even spanned beyond that, which is kind of fun.
Yeah, unifying musical force.
They are. And let's talk about the Straw Hatters. They are a Dixieland band. And can you talk to folks a bit about Dixieland music?
A Dixie band predates jazz bands as we know them today. Before Dixie and before the late 1800s, people would listen to large symphonic bands, right? They'd go to concert halls. Now they were taking it out to the streets because they were being influenced by the American music that was going on at the time. Within that music, ragtime. So they pulled, clarinets, trumpets, trombones, tubas, just one instrument from each section, basically, high brass, low brass, woodwinds, and percussion, to create more chamber versions of these symphonic tunes in a jazzier setting. And again, it predates jazz, but that's, again, jazz as in Jass, which is the way they used to spell it before it became what we know today.
I actually didn't know that jazz was spelled Jass at one point.
Yep.
Interesting. Yeah, so they're called the Straw Hatters because they wear hats that are made of straw. And you know what musical almost every male character wears a straw hat in?
Is it The Music Man?
The Music Man. It all ties back to The Music Man. But yes, so the Straw Hatters are named by the hats that they wear on their head. And not only do they play their instruments, but there's also a lot of singing involved with this. And it's a pretty small group. I think there's a banjo, right? Like that's one of the sounds that is very specific to them. Once again, playing a lot of like kind of older standards. One I know you're a fan of is Jeepers Creepers, if you want to talk a little bit about that.
So Jeepers Creepers was written as a standalone tune, and then it was plugged into a bunch of different stuff. It became a jazz standard. And of course, in the 50s, I think it was, Louis Armstrong recorded it. And that's actually one of the most famous recordings of it. If you look up Jeepers Creepers, Louis Armstrong, you will have heard this song at some point.
Jeepers Creepers.
Yeah. Where'd you get those peepers?
Sing it for me.
Jeepers Creepers.
Yeah. Everybody's got their Louis Armstrong impression, right? They also performed the original Dixieland One Step, which is a 1917 jazz composition, as well as Ain't She Sweet, which was published in 1927. Anything to add about those songs?
Yeah, I may be mistaken, but Dixieland One Step is actually, if you know the tune, pop, 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 wah, da, 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 da. It is, I believe, the first band to be recorded on wax.
Mm.
So it's actually one of the first. I know Mary Had a Little Lamb was the first song recorded by Bell himself, but I believe Dixieland Jazz Band was the first band to be recorded. And it's actually a very important tune in music history. And it's called Dixieland Jazz Band One Step, which is, it says it all. It's exactly what it is.
And Ain't She Sweet?
Ain't she sweet? Da, 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 da. That's also another one that was like a Tin Pan Alley tune.
Now let's move on to the Main Street Piano Player, which you can find over on Refreshment Corner at the end of Main Street USA. And these songs, a couple of them, yes, the Main Street Piano Player plays them, but they're also part of the Main Street Music Loop as well. One of them is the Maple Leaf Rag, and this was written by Scott Joplin in 1899. So this is kind of like the perfect timing for turn of the century, right? Or I guess a couple of years early. But this one, is this the dun 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 dun? Now I have another funny connection with this song, if I may. I have weird connections to songs. There was a shooting arcade at Hampton Beach in New Hampshire that I loved growing up as a kid playing, and I'd have that, that rifle in the hand, and like the shooting arcade in Frontierland, you hit the target and it activates something. There was a piano player, and it was this song that it played. So yes, every time I hear the piano player on Main Street play it, I just think I just shot him in the butt, like it did up at Hampton Beach, New Hampshire. Dun, 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 da, 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 dun, da, da, da,
Wait, was he a target? Was the piano player like a
Yeah.
mechanical target?
His butt was, yeah.
That's great.
Maybe it was the bench, but it certainly looked like his butt. And
Oh, fair enough.
yeah. So that's what I think of when I hear the Maple Leaf Rag. I'm sure that was the intention when it was written, right? And then there's Alexander's Ragtime Band. This one was also heard in the music loop. And this is a Tin Pan Alley song by Irving Berlin in 1911. Tin Pan Alley, I always loved hearing about Tin Pan Alley in like musical theater classes and stuff, because it was such an important part in music history and just such a cool concept. So if you could, Pablo, please tell the folks about Tin Pan Alley.
Sure. So, like I had mentioned a little earlier, Tin Pan Alley, a lot of tunes got churned out of there. People like Cole Porter, Irving Berlin, a bunch of those, we'll call it turn of the century, but into the 20s and early 30s. It is on what today is 27th Street in New York. Just imagine walking down Main Street, and all the windows, instead of being down, are opened, and music is flooding out from these windows. That was what you got when you walked down 27th Street in the 20s. A bunch of composers that are now super important to the history of music were 20-something, 30-something-year-old dudes writing, the songs that ended up in movies, ended up in on the radio, ended up as standards. But it was just a factory for music, which I don't think there's really a place that does that today.
No, it's people sitting in the dark in their basements and offices doing that stuff in solidarity with headphones on so nobody's hearing it. Yeah, no, and when you say, imagine the windows open with all of this music blasting out, keep in mind, everybody was working on something different. This wasn't like music all in sync sort of thing. This was noise. That's how I got the name Tin Pan Alley. It sounded like banging a tin pan because it was just such a cacophony of different songs, different styles of music, all banging around this one street in New York, which is kind of crazy. And of course, Disney fans know the Sherman Brothers, Disney legends, the Sherman Brothers, who wrote so much music for Disney parks and media. And their dad was a Tin Pan Alley artist. And that's how, they were kind of introduced to music and stuff. So yeah, Tin Pan Alley, a huge, huge, huge important part of music history, musical theater history. even some Disney history when it comes to the Sherman Brothers and such. So Tin Pan Alley, such a cool concept and something we'll probably never see again.
We'll get back there. I mean, we'll get tired of this digital stuff. We'll get back there.
Yeah, maybe. Who knows? Main Street Piano Player also performs Puttin' on the Ritz, da-da-da-da-da, another Irving Berlin song from 1927. I love the Main Street Piano Player. He's a lot of fun. If you have a chance, check him out. Or her. I don't know. There probably are female piano.
I don't think I've ever
though.
seen one. That's actually worth noting. I think it's always been gentlemen.
Well, or not so gentle.
Michael's really nice. How dare you? Shout out to piano player Michael.
Nice. Awesome. Well, we have simply been talking about the non-Disney music on Main Street USA, but there is so much more when you add in the Disney music and also other offerings like the Firehouse Band, which isn't really on the schedule these days, but folks have probably seen the Firehouse Band out in front of the firehouse. Another piece of music that is kind of important, but people probably don't think about, and I say it's important because it's been there since opening day of Disneyland. Inside the Candy Palace on Main Street USA is Disneyland's Welt Style 4 Concert Orchestrion. And this is basically a one-man band machine. So there is no band. It's a one-band machine where it'll play tunes, and it does it about every 5 minutes or so, I think, in the Candy Palace. And it does play Disney music. This is not a non-Disney band, but it's kind of wild to think that that's been there since July 17th, 1955.
Yeah, I don't know if it started there or if it started at the Main Street railroad stop, the railway stop, because it was there in the early 2000s.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I don't know if it flipped back and forth, but it for sure has been in the Main Street Railway as well.
Interesting. And there is another one over in Frontierland as well that plays different types of music and stuff. But that's another music offering as part of Main Street USA. Of course, there's more music when it comes to parades and fireworks shows and the Disneyland Resort All-American College Band, if they ever return. They are a hoot if you've never seen them. They're just like a summer thing, right? Where it's college kids from across the country audition and perform. And it's a lot of popular music and Disney music and stuff and high energy. And they're a lot of fun. And there's a bit of controversy when I guess it was decided they weren't going to return. And then Disney kind of backstepped and were like, no, they're not going to return this year. They'll be back. They'll be back. So,
well, they weren't here this year either. So
we'll
who
see.
knows?
We'll see when they come back, but hopefully they do. But my point is, Main Street USA features a crap ton of music. A lot of it is period specific. And the amount of sources it comes from is super impressive, from pre-recorded to tons of live music. I'm going to guess anybody listening to this is probably realizing it's even more than they thought. It's wild how much there is, and thank God for it, because as you know, live entertainment is like my favorite thing in the Disney parks, and I'm sure it's probably yours as well. And gosh, it's all on Main Street USA, a land that you weren't even sure was a land.
That's true.
So it's pretty wild. Now, folks, we talked about a lot of songs here today. Yes, you got to hear us hum them beautifully. But if you'd really like to know the songs a bit more, I will, of course, have links in the show notes. So be sure to check those out. But Pablo, before you get going here, tell me a little bit about your Swingin with the Mouse project that you've got going on.
Of course. I'm glad you asked. Swingin with the Mouse is a music collective that sort of takes the reimagining side of Disney. They do that a lot with their properties and really put some juice into it on the music side of things. So we take songs that we all know and love, and we perform them in new jazz renditions. They could be songs
jazz,
from,
Jazz or JASS?
You have to come to the show to find out. But yeah, we take songs from Broadway, we take songs from the parks, we take songs from all over Disney, and we reimagine them in different styles. We go from swing to Latin, rumbas or salsas or cumbias. We have some Dixie in there. We have stuff that dates from the late 1800s to today's jazz. So it's a very exciting opportunity for me to honor Walt and his vision of imagination. And I think that's it's something unique, and I hope that people come check it out.
And you orchestrate or arrange these
I arrange
tunes,
it, yeah,
right?
for an awesome 6-piece band. Sometimes we throw in another horn or a guitar or something. I think, DCTC exclusive. But when the second album comes out, which is already mostly recorded, we have violins in there. Violins have been a part of Nat King Cole's music, Frank Sinatra's music. So like we take from different genres and different eras of jazz and really try to honor both jazz as a genre, as a big genre, and Disney, which are both very, very American things.
And you have some Disney stars that join you to sing these tunes, right?
Yeah, we do. We have Keith David, who is Dr. Facilier. You might also know him as Goliath from the 90s. We have Garrett Clayton, who is Beach Boy Tanner. We have Dee Dee Magno Hall, who is a Mouseketeer from the era of Britney Spears and Ryan Gosling, the late 80s, early 90s, right? We have Richard White, original Gaston. Make sure to bring eggs. He's very hungry.
Not to throw at them.
Yeah. And and we have Jennifer Stone, who played Harper on the Disney Channel. A lot of kids from the late 2010s might recognize her, early 2010s. And very exciting, first time the Swingin' with the Mouse member, DCTC alum Caitlin Robrock, who many of you might have heard her voice as Minnie Mouse in the parks and around the world.
Very, very cool. And people have numerous opportunities you said the album's coming out, the second album. Of course, I got the first one and we've talked about it a bit on here, but there are some live opportunities to experience these performances, right?
Yes. So we have 3 performances coming up September 29th in Downey, California, about 15 to 20 miles away from Disneyland. And September 30th, 2 performances, a matinee and an evening in Thousand Oaks. So either side of Los Angeles that you find yourself, if you can find yourself in LA, we're going to have a magical time.
Excellent. That's going to be so much fun. And people can get tickets and learn more where?
www.
What are you, 90? www. Who says that anymore?
https // it's broadwestentertainment.com. That's broad as in Broadway, west as in on the west, entertainment.com.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, Pablo, to talk about the music of Main Street USA. Congratulations on all things Swingin' with the Mouse, because it's still swinging.
Thanks, Jeff. I know I'm no Kyle Burbank, but thank you very much for having me.
Kyle will love and appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks for tuning into this episode. If you enjoyed it, I'm sure you'll love episode 922 of DCTC, where I have a chat with a Dapper Dan about the Dapper Dans. So go back and give it a listen. Don't miss any future episodes by subscribing and following Dizney with a Z, coast to coast on your favorite podcast app, where episodes are available 24/7. If you're a longtime listener of the show, thank you. And if you have the means, consider supporting the show over on Patreon. By joining Disney Coast to Coast's Patreon membership, you'll gain access to extra bonuses, including live stream Ask Me Anythings, unreleased episodes, and more bonus content. Take a look at all that's available by clicking the Patreon link in this episode's description, and thank you for considering. Until next time, anything you need can be found in this episode's description. From additional information and links discussed in this episode found in the show notes, to the DCTC hotline where you can leave a voicemail and be heard on a future episode, contact info to reach me, access to the show's official website, some free gifts from me to you, and so much more. So be sure to check out this episode's description. Other than that, folks, have a magical day. Bye!